We are starting final now. Do you think in the coming age of this generative AI, where the generic task can be done, can the roles be reversed?
The consultancy kind of jobs, I believe AI will take over,
Yeah.
right? I mean, now you feed it all the information that you have, right? It will prepare a policy, it will identify the problem, it will do all of that. These tools are all becoming so powerful, right? In just the last 3 years, you have seen.
But India, do you think that making semiconductors IP is very important for next 20 years for our nation?
Semiconductors will be everywhere.
Yeah.
Even if you talk about AI, right, it will all be semiconductors, built around semiconductors. My point always is something is being done in Taiwan, right? You do it in India, right? That doesn't change anything. You know, whether I buy from Taiwan the chip or buy from India doesn't change anything. So India needs to innovate.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today for this episode. Till now, I have gone through all your videos and interviews.
Oh, you've done that. That's
Yeah.
very nice to know.
So, one thing that clearly stand out to me was your critical thinking. Yeah, any opinion coming from you is not only the deep experience, but also the critical thinking beyond that. And for Neev, for this episode, I want to go beyond those things and want to break that mental model, and for the audience and for me also to understand the operating system coming from you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes. So basically, I want to start from the very early. You studied from Telugu-Medium, and you were not really open to attempt. You were not willing to attempt IIT JEE, but yet you are leading the. You ended up leading the great prestigious institutes in India. Was English really that felt like that wall back then?
No, in fact, when the days I started, I'm very ancient that way. So I in fact did the schooling during 70s, right? So the 70 to 82 was when the first standard to 12th standard, right? And at that time, I come from a very rural background in Telangana, so very deep Telangana kind of a region. And there, the schools were all government schools. That time, the private education was not so popular. And also, you know, the private schools also meant high tuition fee and all of that. So I'm from a lower middle class kind of a background. And so given all of that, the only option for me was to go to the local government school.
Yeah.
We used to call it upper primary school, Telangana. That time it was a combined Andhra Pradesh, of course. And so there it was only Telugu medium. And because it's a very remote place, no teacher would even stay there. And even the aspirations of students there, in fact, when I look back, you know, 10th standard until 10th standard, 12th standard I studied in the same school. And when I go back, it's my native place, I still have, you know, connections there. When I go back, you know, the friends I go to meet with, they are all running shops, they are sitting in a shop. So I go there and then you know, they say, why don't you sit here, I will go out and come back. So so that kind of an atmosphere where the aspiration is not education and to achieve something big, you know, from those places.
Yeah.
And the aspiration is to just make money, do business, start a shop, you know, and do business and make money kind of things. And they did not really need education, so from those places. But still in my school, there were 2 or 3 of us who were very, you know, education oriented. And my family, the family background I came from, we had nothing other than, you know, studying and doing a job. Other than that, we did not know what else to do. So it was all about studying well, you know, doing well in academics, and then to find a good job. That was all what it meant. And, so that's what we all did. But I did very well in my school in those days, in that school. And but you know, it's also like a frog in the well kind of a thing, right? I mean, where everybody is blind, one-eyed is the king kind of a thing. So I did very well in my school. I topped and all of that. But then, you know, in a small place, in a small village kind of an atmosphere, so everybody thought I am super brilliant and super good and all of that. And but you know, it was all Telugu medium until 12th standard. In fact, it was so Telugu that I often tell people, you know, even our English was taught in Telugu, right? It was It was, there was nothing like speaking 4 complete sentences of English was unthinkable. Even our teachers could not have done that. So for me to do that would have been difficult. So that was the kind of a background overall. And so the IIT JEE was only in English at that time. It was not even in Hindi. And I had no way to even take that exam. It was beyond my comprehension, because I could not even understand what the questions were. Because for us, electron would not be electron. Electron would be a Telugu equivalent of that. So now, what is the difference between electron and proton was the big confusion, because in Telugu we learned those words. Now in BTech I joined electronics, and so now which is electron, which is neutron, because now we have to map every Telugu word with the English word, and that's how it all started. And but I did well in the local that Andhra Pradesh exam. I went to Warangal. I graduated from there, and but then I thought I was not satisfied. I was not happy that I learned anything. It's okay, I got marks and did all of that, but by then I realized that I should at least go to an IIT, and because I even heard about IITs when I joined my BTech. And so I thought I should go to an IIT and get that exposure to what quality education is, what people are, and then I prepared seriously for the GATE exam, and then I went to IIT Bombay for my masters, MTech in microelectronics. So that was the turning point for me. I mean, once I went there, then in a class there would be students from all over the country, and the class sizes was small at that time, 13, 14 students, but everybody was very good and from all over the country, and I could place myself, where I stand, kind of a thing. Until that time, it was all the reference point were all the local schools and local colleges, but IIT Bombay changed my life forever, and so that's where I got the exposure. I got to know what I am capable of, where I am in comparison with others, and then once I realized my own potential, and I wanted to pursue my whatever aspirations that I had, and all of that.
So like you got the sense of belonging over there, reaching there, and so the story is really aspiring. You were doing the things, and you were not well aware, and it is the story of millions of us, like millions of Indians. Do you think that in India we often confuse fluency with with intelligence, and we lose the brilliant people over there?
I think so. In fact, there is a lot of talent in the remote places. Right. So whatever I did subsequently in my life were also because of the upbringing I had. When IIT Bombay, for example, I wanted to, we all want good PhD students, but if you are going to do research, you need good PhD students. And where would you find good PhD students? I always knew that, in every tiny college, there are good people. The top 5% in that college will always be very good. They may not have gone to IITs or come to BITS Pilani, kind of places, but they are still very good, in terms of their understanding, comprehension, all of that. I used to go to any college which invites me, remotest parts of the country. Because I was a professor at IIT Bombay, so I would get a lot of invitations. Many people don't even respond to those emails, would not even look at any of those invitations. But I made it a point to visit large number of such institutions in remotest parts of the country. And I used to give talks, technical talks on my subject area. I used to challenge the students, right, whoever there in that college. Anybody in the class who asks a very good question after listening to me, after 45 minutes, 1 hour of lecture, of the technical talk, I would give them a project, an internship first at IIT Bombay. So you can come and do internship with me. And if you do well in those 2 months, right, I would offer you a project position. Because I don't expect them to clear GATE exams and all that. They are all very difficult for many of them. But they are good. I knew that. Then I would give you a project staff position. If you do well in the project, I would sponsor you to do masters or PhD. And then you can IITs, even BITS Pilani, those options are available. That's what I used to do. So most of the students I attracted were through that process. Go to the remote places and then ask them questions. When they ask me questions, they should ask intelligent questions. Because that essentially meant that they understood what I taught in that 1 hour, and they were able to ask a question which had a depth, which really required me to think. Right. So that kind of students will never fail you, and most of the students I got to the process, did excellently and did very well. So I could build my entire career, thanks to many of those people. Of course, I also had students from good institutions and all of that, but I had quite a few students, identified to that process.
Yes.
And it is also the satisfaction that you could transform somebody's life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from those places, for them to come to institutions like, BITS
Yeah.
or IIT are unthinkable. And because they would not have the exposure, they would not even speak very well and all of that. And but for them, coming there and that, grooming that, that one could provide them and the transformation you could see in their lives, I think that was very satisfying.
Right. Finding the talent and polishing that.
Right. That's very important.
Yeah, it is. very
Otherwise,
important.
we all want students from IITs and BITS, right?
Yeah.
But these students, none of you would do PhD. I don't think many of you are even thinking of doing a PhD.
Yeah.
That is my biggest concern right now about higher education in India.
Yeah.
Because even in IITs, less than 5% of students are pursuing higher education.
Higher education.
The 95% of students are finding a job and happy with that.
Yeah.
Right? So I would explain to you why I think it's a problem. It's a challenge. Many of you, I believe, should pursue higher education, should do PhD, should do great research, and then do entrepreneurship, then solve problems, then do all of that.
Yeah.
But BTech is a very first degree.
First
BE is a very first degree.
Yeah.
Stopping with just a BE, you wouldn't know, much about anything.
Yeah.
Right now, if I tell you to solve a problem, right? I mean, you would only look for some app, some logical kind of a way to solve it, right? But you wouldn't know whether a quantum technology would solve it, whether a nanotechnology would solve it. Where I think much of the deep exposure to these new age kind of domains, right? That exposure you would not get in a undergraduate kind of a degree, and that is where I would think some of you, the brightest talent, the top 1%, 2% of the country, which is what you are all are, and you should you doing the PhD, you doing very well, having that research exposure,
Yes.
and then solving problems, using some of these deep technologies. I think that sort of a thing that I would like to see students from the tier 1 institutions in the country to do.
So in your one of your previous interviews I was seeing, and you just mentioned this this concern, and as well you were telling that 1 out of 5 people when enter the college in BE programs, basically they get this feeling of comfortable, being comfortable and achievement, and they stop pursuing, they stop that fire within them is then okay, they are okay with what they have now. And that is the biggest issue and biggest problems to solve.
Sure.
Coming on to that, there are a lot of startups.
So I often say that getting into BITS, getting into IITs at the age of 18
Yeah.
is like winning Wimbledon.
Yeah.
Right now, if you have won Wimbledon, what more is there? Now everything else is secondary kind of a thing, right? I mean, you have achieved something. That feeling stays with you, and you are happy with just continuing on that and doing things.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge. I mean, these examinations, getting to these institutions has become so difficult that itself becomes the biggest achievement of life.
Yeah.
But after that, you know that there are good alumni, there are things that
Exactly.
you can do and you can manage kind of a thing. So many students don't pursue also because of this sense of achievement
Yeah,
of
sense of
getting into these institutions.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I'm seeing around me a lot of people getting that feeling and not doing anything. And I mean, not doing anything is a wrong word,
Of
but
course.
yeah, like in a comfortable position. And there's a lot of fashion to, nowadays of finance and pursuing PM and consulting. We were like just went through the placement seasons. Do you think in the coming age of this generative AI, where the generic task can be done with the new technology, the getting this core knowledge, like you mentioned, the quantum, I don't know the exact scope of things I can do to solve the problem. Can the roles be reversed? Basically, people are switch to these consulting and PMs because of the paycheck. And if if the AI is doing the task, and we know if I am the technical expert of thing, is in coming years this going to reverse the cards and we can get the desired paycheck?
I think so. The consultancy kind of jobs, I believe AI will take over.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, now you feed it all the information that you have, right? It will prepare a policy, it will identify the problem, it will do all of that. These tools are all becoming so powerful, right? In just the last 3 years, you have seen how much they have evolved, right? Today, the modern model, the current models that you see are good reasoning, good logical thinking, and they can do all of that. So, so most of these jobs can be done by AI, right? But what is that AI cannot do? Right? I mean, you can learn everything from these tools now. I mean, you can even get to learn quantum, nano, if you just sit with them and it will explain to you the concepts. There's so much of material available everywhere. You can learn all of that, right? But that's not the end of anything, right? You have to go and build something. Now, the future is all those who can go and build something, right? The confidence that everybody has learned everything, right? Now, the confidence that I can go to a lab and create a prototype, build a system, that confidence, not everybody will have. And so, knowing will be democratized, right? But doing by hands, that is the skill that will be, that will stand in good stead as you go forward. And that is the practice-based learning, right? That is what is important. And BITS does a good job. If you have seen in the last 3 years or even overall BITS history, the legacy and all of that, the practice school kind of concepts are very unique to BITS. In fact, you may not even believe there is not a single institution in the country which is doing anything like practice school at the scale that BITS Pilani does right now. And that, that thinking, that whole practice-based kind of a learning is very unique to BITS, and that is what will make the BITS graduates, much better suited for what is going to come beyond the era of AI. And that's the reason why I don't want all of you to just stop with, with very basic kind of learning and using these tools to do consultancy and all of that. With the kind of talent, with the kind of skills or with the kind of, the mastery that you are all endowed with, I think if you can get deeper into a subject, understand that deeply, apply it to real world problems, right, and build something, to solve a problem. I think that I believe, will be, I would like to see the top 1%, top 2% of the country to actually do, which is currently not the case.
So, like pursuing higher studies will, basically people will be shifting to core technology and core engineering that was long forgotten, and AI cannot fake that, that if you have the knowledge.
So, look at, you go to airport, right? I mean, the security checks at the airport. Now, can you simplify them? Why should every bag be kept in a thing, and why should there be a long queue for the security check, right? There can be lot of new technologies. When we thought about that problem of security at airports, that's how our company NanoSniff got born. And now every airport in the country today, if not today, in the very near future, right now every second airport in the country uses the explosive detectors that we developed. Very unique technology, worldwide patents, complete IP belongs to us and all done in India, not anything, nothing is done outside. But that you could not have done with a BTech degree. That needed a deep PhD kind of a background. And so I want to see more and more students solving these problems, even agriculture, right? Why are farmers committing suicide? Why is the average income of a farmer today 1,000 rupees or 1,500 rupees? What can we do to boost the productivity of the crops, right? For that you need to understand what is agriculture, what are micronutrients, what are macronutrients, what is the yield, how do you improve crop productivity, right? That will require lots of sensing technologies, sensing platforms. And that again will require use of nanotechnology, use of material science, lot of things will again, electrochemistry, all of that will have to go into building those platforms. So whether it's agriculture or security or even the environmental issues, right? The Delhi pollution, that is not an easy problem to solve, right? Even measuring pollution, and then addressing that, right? That will require a very deep understanding of technology. So I think, and then there are lots of such areas which need a much deeper understanding of a subject area. So a BE degree is good for consulting, is good for just scratching the surface in any area. You are all very bright, right? At the end of the day, you will figure out, you will learn, you will do that. But I think the typical thing, I have been interacting with a lot of alumni in the US, right? Or many alumni even in India. I think the typical template seems to be that, at least with many of those who have done well, there are at least 100 alumni I know now worth more than $100 million kind of wealth in the Bay Area itself. What is the way they have done all of that? they go and work for a big company, right? It could be NVIDIA, Google, or any of these semiconductor companies and all of that. So they work there enough time. They understand the pain points of the company. Where is that the company is struggling, right? What is that they are not able to solve? Because in a big company, to solve a problem, sometimes becomes difficult. The resources, they have to have teams and they have to have the orientation. So once these guys understand what the problem is, they come out of that company, right, along with a few friends, solve that problem as a startup and sell that back to that same company, for 500 million, 600 million and make it big. That is the template for many Bitsians who have done very well, I think, which is okay. So that's also another way you are learning, right? Learning doesn't mean you have to go to a college, do PhD and learn. Even while doing a job, right, you can learn things about that company and you learn by practice, and then you identify problem sets there, come out, build a company that solves those problems, because many of those problems would be common across many such industries, and then they do it very well, I think, which is also okay. But I would, but if you had pursued higher education, right, if you had waited a little bit longer, right, I think you could have done many more things than an average Bitsian kind of a thing. Average Bitsian is happy with getting a decent salary. And,
Right. Yeah, correct. I saw NanoSniff. It was firstly the healthcare sensing platform, and then pivoted to explosive detection system used across airports. It is a fascinating paradox, I would say. Was the initial idea fitting the market? Was there a problem with initial idea fitting the market? That's why the pivot was done.
Yeah. No, we tried many things. In fact, way back in 2006, right, we wanted to, we thought we found something new, right? At least we had a very good problem. Even in all leading institutions today, how do you do research, right? The way people do research is you go to library, right? You read 100 papers, you find that this is done, this is done, this is not done, and then you give that problem to a PhD student. PhD student will do that. You publish another paper. That is how most of the problems in India originate from library, because that only place is the library, and go study, identify a problem and publish more papers. That is how today, even today, right, I am not talking of 2005, even 2026, 95% of problems are found that way, through library. Anything which you find in library, it goes back to library. It never sees the light of the day. There are at least, large percentage of papers researchers write, nobody cites them. Nobody has ever read that paper, right? That is the status of research in many institutions in India. But we, 2005 onwards, I made a very conscious decision at IIT Bombay, right, which was not the norm there. My thing was, let's find problems not from library, but by interacting with stakeholders in the society, right? The very first problem we found at IIT Bombay, through other colleagues and all of that was, when somebody was having a chest pain in IIT Bombay and took that person to the hospital, a faculty member, during MTech interviews actually. So the chest pain wouldn't go away, and then the doctors would do tests, and then they explain, the entire process. Now I need to send the blood samples and I have to get the reports, and until that time I don't know. For almost like the reports take, that time it used to take 4 hours of time, right, to get those troponin, myoglobin kind of markers in the blood, and the ECG looks normal, but I cannot discharge the patient because there are many silent heart attacks where ECG can be normal and yet somebody can be having a heart attack. But that you can only detect through some of these markers in the blood. But then the doctor said, it takes me 4 hours, now I cannot do anything with the patient. Right, and these are the challenges. So while talking, the doctor also said, why don't you guys develop something which right here with a drop of blood, I can also detect these markers, that I don't have to send it to a laboratory and all of that, right? And that is how the problem originated. So we came back, we wrote a proposal. So our very first problem in that mode was detecting cardiac markers for detecting heart attacks, in a very low cost kind of a way. So we said 100 rupees. Bedside, can we detect these markers? That was the problem statement. I am an electrical engineer, I have no idea myoglobin, troponin and all that, but I knew that at the end of the day, detection is a sensing kind of a platform.
Right.
And so now, then we started to look at what could be the platforms to detect those proteins in the blood, right? Then we started to talk to people. biomedical engineering, chemistry departments, mechanical department. There were 6 departments involved at IIT Bombay to address that whole problem, because it required microfluidics, it needed electronics, which we could do in electrical. It needed sensing platforms, it needed electrochemistry. Then we went to chemistry department, and then some of the platforms needed analysis at the micro level, right? The nano mechanical cantilevers vibrating. So it required a lot of mechanical analysis. We went to mechanical department. The biomedical was involved. So we formed a team of some of our young people. Then we got that project funded. Then we started working on it, and we built a prototype, because our goal was, of course, you need to publish papers, you need to graduate students and all that, but our end goal was to develop a prototype which you can take it to a hospital and test, right? So we actually built that platform. By 2010, we had working prototypes of cardiac markers, and which was working well in the laboratory. And then the next stage was to do hospital trials. Now, how would you do hospital trials if you are a professor? So we thought, let's start a company. And so that is how the problem, the NanoSniff got born. And so then we got in touch with some alumni of IIT Delhi and other places. So we were already in the news for doing all of that. And somebody read those news in Delhi, approached us saying, can we work together? And then we started working together. And but that problem required huge hospital trials in the country. And but that we could not figure out in 2010, how to go through the hospital trials, because the whole startup ecosystem at that time, right, for doing all of that was not well developed. And there was this philosophy that government funding, the public funding, cannot go to a private company. A startup is a company, and no government would fund a company. They would like to fund a professor, but they would not fund a company. Right? Now things have changed. In the last 5 years, things have changed. But that time, that was a kind of a concept. Public money cannot be given to a private company. And but who would give money? Then you need to raise money from investors. And at that time, again, there was no VC who would fund a company which hasn't even gone through hospital trials. And so we were struggling with all of that. But then in the process, we built a good sensing platform which could detect molecules. They're the proteins in the biological case, but otherwise you can detect molecules. So then there was again, because everybody knew us for the work we were doing, that we are doing sensing, we built prototypes of cardiac markers and all that. So people started approaching us, some of the government agencies. And so some of the security people in airports came to us and said, can you develop an explosive detector, which is becoming a big problem right now in the airports. And so that's how the same platform we started using for explosive detection. And then we built the very first prototypes for explosive detection. And so by then 2011, we started our first company, NanoSniff Technologies Private Limited. The first product we transferred to them was cardiac thing. Right, and they were trying to figure out how to do hospital trials and all that. Then the second product they took up was explosive detection. The cardiac thing, they tried hard. They could sell parts of it to various people and then earn some money out of that, but they could not really commercialize that. And as a system, it did not go too far, because it needed huge amount of funding, trials and all that. But the explosive detector thing worked very well. And once it started working, then that became a product by itself. So then we got now big orders, and the company is doing very well now, and almost every airport will have that, and that kind of a thing. So therefore, it did not start with the explosive detection. It was about solving a problem that we found, in a hospital. That's how the whole thing started. And but then it took so many turns, and finally we succeeded with that. And so that's the story. So but the whole mindset was to think differently. In IIT Bombay, that time ours was the very first project that involved at least 6 departments. Until that time, everybody would do their own project, get some funding, do some project, publish some papers. But ours was the first large project at IIT Bombay, which involved so many departments and which involved developing a technology, to solve a problem in the society. So that kind of a mindset we created among faculty. Now all the people who were part of that group, many of them now have their own companies, because that gave them the confidence that we can do that. That large project we did actually transformed the culture at IIT Bombay in terms of taking up problems of societal relevance and
Yeah.
and then so I think that was a very interesting kind of a project. I mean, 20 years ago the institute was not doing anything like that,
Yeah.
but now you see that even in BITS now there are multiple startups by faculty.
Yeah.
Everywhere now, multiple such companies by faculty. So things are happening. But when we were doing that in 2005, it was not the kind of a norm. So
Right.
I think so thinking differently,
Yeah.
right? Breaking the norms,
Yeah.
trying to do original kind of things. Because the question I asked myself was very clear. I came back from UCLA, University
Yeah.
of California at Los Angeles, and I thought, if I was all my projects from 1998 when I joined IIT Bombay till 2005 were for Intel, for IBM, for Texas Instruments, all the semiconductor companies. The question I asked myself was, or Infineon, I did a lot of projects for Infineon. Question I asked was, if I wanted to work for these semiconductor companies, I could have as well stayed back in the US, right,
Yeah.
and got paid much higher salaries and done the same thing.
Yeah.
Why would I come back to India and work for these American companies, right?
Right.
I thought, if I have come back to India, I should do something, to solve a problem here.
Yeah.
And that kind of a thing made me very restless. Starting from 2004, 2005 onwards, any problem that I picked up was
Yeah.
only because of my observation in the society,
Yeah.
interactions with different stakeholders. So I think that change that happened to me in 2005, right, trying to do things differently, right, that definitely worked very well for me. And
Right.
so, I mean, I think, I mean, we are all right on hindsight, but I think, but that thinking process at that time was indeed unique and
Yeah.
new. So,
It is a beautiful story, like very innovative, involving a lot of departments, and especially you being the expert in electronics and entering the technical side of the problem, and even identifying the problem and solving that. You mentioned venture VC ecosystem were not that much friendly with the, and
patient
even
capital, they were all funding apps and all that, but something which requires long incubation times.
yeah,
That funding is still a problem in India.
yeah,
You can get, government now has woken up to that fact that they need to support such companies. So, government is doing its bit, but the VCs are still not doing it. VCs are still looking at a problem which would give them the returns in 3 years time frame, 4 years time frame, but not over 10 years time frame.
Yeah,
That problem exists, right?
the deep tech need a lot of timeline. And do you think there is still a misunderstanding in this ecosystem for the deep tech, VC ecosystem for the deep tech startups, because they are ready to fund software companies and all that will give return in a couple of years. So what is the biggest misunderstanding amongst these?
I think the patient capital is something which is a challenge still, right? And in the Silicon Valley kind of places, that ecosystem is deep rooted, right? I mean, you look at Vinod Khosla, right? He funded OpenAI like 10 years ago when there was nothing like that anybody was talking about, right? And he was willing to wait for 10 years and that something would happen kind of a thing. But so that ecosystem is very strongly developed in the Silicon Valley. Just yesterday I was reading some news item that a lot of good AI companies in India are now going to Silicon Valley to further their activities, because they know that is the place where they can find good customers who will also pay the right price, right? In India, you want to sell it to anybody, they want it for free first, right? And if you cannot negotiate, if they cannot negotiate, then they will pay you the basic minimum, that they can give you kind of a thing. But in Silicon Valley, the customers are not as demanding in terms of price. I think they are willing to pay a higher price for a technology, and the VC system, the venture capital system, is pretty well developed. So I just read a news yesterday that a lot of Indian good AI companies are now incubating in Silicon Valley because of that ecosystem. But I think in all of that, India is evolving. I mean, government is doing its bit. I am quite happy with the government that the kind of quantum activities they have funded. The government money like 20 crores going to a startup in the quantum area, was unthinkable 10 years ago.
Right.
But now government is willing to put public money into a startup, and the same thing, a lot of good AI companies in India are also beginning to get, slightly higher amounts of money. But, in Silicon Valley, when they talk about fundraising, they are talking of 100 million, 200 million kind of a money, and that in Indian ecosystem you can never get. And
Yeah, Yeah, so the capitalist issue, and one thing, there's a famous term, uncanny valley of futility. That is basically when a product is seem to be futuristic, but it acts like prototype. We can take example of like Google Glass. It was launched back in 2013. People were not aware of AI. Now we are having these smart glasses as well launched from Ray-Ban. Do you think innovation is more about timing and deployment as well?
No, it's very important. That I learned with my own example. In IIT, we were also working on Silicon Locket. The Silicon Locket was a project funded by TCS, the Tata Consultancy Services, again like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? And IIT Bombay, Professor Dinesh Sharma and some of them, right, they actually, Professor Dinesh Sharma is also the person who developed the electronic voting machines. In fact, his contribution was very instrumental in developing electronic voting machine. He is one of the finest instrumentation engineers I have come across. So, as a group in microelectronics group, Silicon Locket was a very big kind of a project. We developed equivalent of what you have in Apple Watch, right, 20 years ago in IIT Bombay.
Wow.
It could, it's a locket that you wear, right, and you can actually monitor lot of parameters including ECG and all of that, warn you of arrhythmia and some of these, right, but then it was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
At that time nobody wanted to take it forward,
Right.
and TCS being a services company, and though they funded the project, but they were also doubtful whether they should get into products or continue with services, because services was paying them very well, they were growing very well, and though the entire product was developed, it never saw the light of the day.
Right.
And but that's when we realized that when you are ahead of time, like you said, it looks like a prototype, and it won't really go too far. And
Right.
I think there is always the right time for anything, and a lot of things need to come together. I think like what Steve Jobs said, lot of dots you need to connect, but you can only connect the dots by looking backward. Right? You do not know, what will connect in the future, kind of a thing. But
Right.
I think that's the challenge that exists. So it has to be at the right time, right kind of a technology. So
Correct. And even in microelectronics, there's a law that the things get cheaper, it gets better. I guess.
Exactly.
So, like you developed NanoSniffs and SoilSense. So, was the cost a big constraint building those things for Indian ecosystem?
that was one interesting thing we even did as project definition at that time. We fixed the price point. We said that if you are developing, let's say, in a cardiac diagnostic system, right, if the marker concentration, if the measurement is like 10,000 rupees, there is no market for that. But if it is let's say 200 rupees, there is a huge market for that. Right?
Yeah, right.
So therefore, now the entire technology is how do I use new materials, how do I use new ways of doing the same thing at a lower cost, right? That also would require a lot of innovative thinking, right? So if I am building I am a nanoelectronics researcher originally, so if I am building a chip, right, I can use silicon for making the cantilevers, the nanomechanical systems to detect cardiac markers using silicon, because if you look at any literature, people have all made cantilevers at that time using silicon. But since our price point was 100 rupees, 200 rupees, we realized that silicon for a use and throw device, you are doing with the blood, and anything that use blood, you cannot reuse it again. So therefore, it's a single use kind of a device. We realized that using silicon for a single use device will never make it affordable. And once we realized that, but entire literature was on making those nanomechanical systems using silicon. So we looked at polymers for the first time in the world. We started looking at alternative materials, alternative ways of processing, and trying to achieve the same thing with that of silicon. And that now opened up new pathways for us. So some of those papers we wrote using polymers to make the nanomechanical systems are cited very, very well, and in scientific literature they are considered to be very unique kind of contributions. So that just because we fixed the price point, because our goal was not to only publish papers or file patents. Our goal was to develop a system that will go into the market, and therefore the price point becomes very difficult, and that helped us to innovate in terms of new materials. Therefore, it also became very interesting research problem in addition to being available, in addition to being what commercially viable kind of a thing. So, so I think sometimes putting constraints into research makes research more interesting, more innovative, and you do things which nobody else would have done. Because if I am, my goal is to publish a paper, right? If I want to make a nanomechanical system to detect something, I would use silicon like everybody else. And but that would never see the commercial kind of a thing. But you can write papers, you can graduate students, you can become a good professor, and all of that, right? So therefore, I think fixing the specifications early on and then looking for ways to achieve that, made the project very interesting. So that is the way it actually worked. So that's what we need to be doing. Whenever after that, once after that initial exposure that we had. Now, any project I started my second company in 2018, SoilSense, which is now in the agriculture space. I will start my third company in another couple of years. We are already working in BITS Hyderabad campus along with some faculty and students. So that, but in all of that, we are already fixing the price point. We are seeing who will be the end users and how much will they be paying for that product. Now, to develop it at that price point, the existing technologies will not work. So you need to now look at new materials, and new materials would open up new challenges, the stability issues, fabrication issues, and so that's how the projects become more interesting. You can do great research, but you can also finally deliver something which is commercially viable. I think that process is very interesting and very what do we call it, exciting. But not many researchers find that, because not all researchers are looking at both of these, the commercial viability and publication worthy kind of research. They are all focusing only on the publication worthy research. If you are looking at publication worthy research, you can do anything and publish any paper, right? There are enough journals where you can publish it. If you are only looking at commercially viable thing, you are looking at something is available in the US. If I do it in India, it will anyway be cheaper, right? And then I am happy just indigenizing something which is available elsewhere, and then make a company which will sell there, which will also sell here at a cheaper cost. These are the two distinct approaches people follow. But if you put the two together, right, then you have something more exciting. That's what makes research more interesting actually. But not many unfortunately do that, because it's a long drawn process. Our entire explosive detector took us 10 years. And but with that experience, when we got into the agricultural sensors, we could do that in about 5 years, 6 years. Now, the third one which we are doing for cancer patients, the detection of radiation, that I think we should do in 3 years. So because you also learn while doing it. So now you know what works, what doesn't work. I think that experience helps in a way.
That is wonderful line, actually putting constraints before. And India, for India, do you think that making semiconductors IP is very important for next 20 years for our nation?
No, it's very important, because semiconductors will be everywhere. Even if you talk about AI, right, it will all be semiconductors, built around semiconductors. And you can keep on importing all the components and build a system here. But that's not that anybody can do. Everybody will do the same thing. So India needs to, and also we don't have enough of manufacturing expertise right now in the country, right? So when we first made some of our technologies, we were looking in India. There were no facilities. So we made these nanomechanical systems with which we could detect the explosives. So we needed a tiny micro heater, right? A micro heater which is the size of a few microns, right? And then it should heat from room temperature to something like 300 degrees centigrade in a matter of milliseconds. So therefore, very low thermal masses. You need temperature sensors integrated with that for the NanoSniff kind of an application. But that fabrication required the expertise in micro nano fabrication, right? That is not available in the country, because India has never invested in semiconductor manufacturing. And the only thing we could have done is send give the technology to a foreign company in the Europe or Taiwan or in the US, and then they would make the entire wafer process for you, and then you buy it back from them, right? But that costs they were charging us for one wafer something like $100,000.
Right.
Now, where would I get $100,000? Because it's not a standard process. The technology is not standard, right? So they have to now do everything for us on a wafer. That would be very expensive, and we did not have money. And then, but how would you solve the problem? Then we went to government. we went to MIT, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. We said, no, we need to create that facility within the country. And that is how we created Center of Excellence in Nanoelectronics at IIT Bombay, then at IIT Delhi, in other institutions now. BITS also has an excellent nano fabrication facility. So that was a need felt at that time, because anything done outside would be too expensive, that we would not be able to raise money. First of all, government wouldn't fund a company. Now the company needs for every wafer processing $100,000. We could not have done anything. But somebody in ministry saw the reason, and then we created those facilities. But that whole process took us almost 4 years. So when I said the first product took us 10 years, 4 years was just getting the money, creating a facility, and we built a proto fab at IIT Bombay. So lot of things took a lot of time, because convincing the secretaries in the government, and so all of that took time. So that's a very long process. But now once you solve it, once you have that infrastructure, now we do everything within the country. So the semiconductor manufacturing is essentially behind everything that you do, right? Anything where there is a chip, you need to manufacture it. Now for every manufacturing, if I have to go somewhere else and get it, we will never be competitive. So we need to learn that the whole manufacturing process for semiconductor technologies. So once you have these fabs, foundries coming in India, I think things will be different. But I also keep telling them, I have also written articles on what India should do differently when it comes to semiconductor foundries. Now my point always is, something is being done in Taiwan, right? You do it in India, right? That doesn't change anything. Whether I buy from Taiwan the chip or buy from India, it doesn't change anything. So India needs to innovate. It needs to innovate, meaning you fund, let's say, 1,000 semiconductor companies, right? These companies require a chip to be done, which is very different from the commercial counter foundries. They need a sensor fab, they need something done differently. And so therefore, all these foundries also need to look at Indian problems, right? Support these Indian companies and do things very innovatively, right? I think those sort of things, if we can enable, along with giving billions of dollars to the semiconductor companies, you also need to support the ecosystem where lot of ideas get generated, which use semiconductors to solve societal problems, agricultural sensors, security sensors. But that kind of a research you need to fund. You need to fund academia aggressively to work on those kind of problems and solutions to those problems, which these companies will then use these semiconductor foundries, the manufacturing experience, and then capture the markets with innovative kind of technologies. So so therefore it has to be, you have to fund academia, you have to fund startups, and you also need to fund manufacturing sector, right? In semiconductors. Currently India is only funding manufacturing sector to manufacture things, but we are not funding academia enough, we are not funding the startups enough. They have started doing it now, I don't blame them, because in the US, for example, when they launched the CHIPS Act, it was all before Trump, Trump is very different, but CHIPS Act, they started funding with the academia. They would allocate some $300 billion, but they would start with first funding academia and then fund the companies to set up more manufacturing facilities. So in India, it's exactly reverse. But even if it is reverse, I think now that we funded, got a lot of manufacturing companies to do things in India, if we can enable that innovation in academic institutions, in startups, I think the two things going hand in hand, India can capture a lot of future markets. Sensors, for example, right? IoT, the Internet of Things as we call it, that market will be worth $1 trillion. As you go into the future, everything will be sensor based, because you are gathering information, and that information your AI will process and give you, correct decisions and all of that. But you need sensors to gather information, which is what makes your chip intelligent, right? But where are the sensors now? Now there is nobody in India, manufacturing any sensors at the scale other than NanoSniff. There is no company which is actually doing sensors at the level that I am talking of, unique IP with worldwide patents, manufacturing something entirely out of India. There is nobody other than NanoSniff doing it. I would like to see a 500 such companies in the country doing such unique kind of things. I think that market for sensors and IoT will be $1 trillion kind of a market, and India can be a leader in that. A sensor foundry will not cost you $2 billion or $3 billion. You can build a sensor foundry in $50 million. So multiple small foundries doing very specialized sensors, and then academia getting engaged with them, and they manufacturing it not only for India but all over the world. I think that if we can create in the next decade, India can actually capture a lot of that census IoT market.
And if you think that 0% attendance policy gives them the room for the innovation?
First of all, there is nothing like a zero attendance policy.
Yeah.
So that's a completely twisted kind of a thing.
Back in 2013, you had that gap year introduced in IIT Delhi as well. Do you think that introducing these things, what is more difficult, building a breakthrough or building an institution that produces a breakthrough? What is your take on leadership and what is your take on serving the nation in 2026?